Growing up in Khayelitsha in the late 1980s and 1990s, I spent a lot of time on my own, with very few recreational activities to keep me busy. That was the reality for me then, and over 20 years later, it's the reality for most children living in poor communities. The reason these children are most vulnerable is because there is such a high prevalence of crime against children, particularly sexual violence. Girls are most vulnerable because there are a lot of men who prey on, and women who prey on girls. And there's also a high incidence of teenage pregnancy in South Africa. I don't need to tell you that we're rated the #1 capital for sexual violence against women and children. That is a fact, and we know it. So, how am I living my life right now? One of the things I wanted to talk about is being a 12-year-old girl living in Khayelitsha, and what it means to be a 12-year-old girl living in Khayelitsha. Being 12 years old means that you're probably negotiating identity development, and this is a time in your life where you're characterized by conflict, both interpersonal, but also peer conflict. And this is a very critical stage at which we can have a lot of influence on children, particularly 12-year-olds. And I choose age 12 because that is when young children are at a cusp. This is before they become teenagers who are so cool, so over life, so checked out, and they couldn't care and give a damn. It is the one point that we can have a significant influence on children and the adults they become if we intervene at that particular age, because we help them form an identity and a key core self, but also a sense of purpose. At age 12, the cracks started to show for me. And how did they show? I started to smoke. It's the first thing most young people do. I binge drank. I stayed away from home many nights. And I was just a nightmare. My teachers hated me. My family hated me. And that was my call for help. Growing up in a household of women, maternal figures, potential role models, you'd think that I'd have a lot more support, but I didn't. And maybe it was just me not being able to ask for help, but also them not having the language to ask, to tell me how they could help. Hindsight tells me that there were a lot of issues, and I'm not sure what they are, but I'm going to try and take a guess. Maybe it was our own ageism. Maybe it was we lacked a common language. I was a coconut, an outsider, a child who commuted in and out of Khayelitsha to attend a previously white school. Every single day, I was exposed to different realities. Coming home was a different reality. Being at school was a different reality. And I think that caused language barriers for us. I look back now and I say we use time as an excuse to actually try and deal with our own issues. And this is a part of my relationship and our relationship that I continue to struggle with. I'm trying not to put my hands in my pocket because that is my coping mechanism now as an adult. So, instead, as a 12-year-old, I was sent to an after-school counseling session where I met a woman, a very amazing woman. She was my mentor. It was the first time I was introduced to the concept of mentoring. I had a woman who would listen to me every week. I could speak, I could be myself, and she saw beyond the troubled girl with behavior problems. This was a fundamental point in my life. It really shifted my perception about myself and who I was to become later in life. Unfortunately, many young children don't have that social support, particularly children living in poor communities. So, having been in this really positive experience with this really amazing person, I was left with many questions, some of which were, why is this kind of phenomenon, this really positive experience, only available to young people in crisis? Why are more young people from my community not taking part in these amazing programs? Where do they find such amazing people, actually, to talk to young people in crisis? And how should we popularize this kind of relationship, this caring relationship between an adult and a child in communities where they have very little resources? And who should do it? And how do I become part of that revolution to bring more mentoring to Black children in townships. And so in trying to answer those questions, there began my 15-year-old journey. My 15-year-old journey to try and answer these questions, but also to educate myself and my community about the power of mentoring to change young people's lives. So you're probably wondering, how is she doing this now? Lauren gave a very interesting introduction. So I don't call myself a director of Thope. I actually see myself as a facilitator of the process. So now, in my work, facilitate intergenerational dialogues with young people and women in their lives. We particularly target 12-year-old girls because they are at that critical age. And we think that at that particular age, we can have a significant influence with very little effort if we can just center them with a caring adult and try and build that caring relationship. We encourage 12-year-old girls to bring women from their community, and this can be a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, an older sister, or the lady from next door. It just has to be a woman that they can talk to openly, that is available to them beyond our program hours, and that is willing to commit the time, because it is a time commitment thing as well. So we facilitate a space, and this is a really crude space. It is a gloves-off space, where women and girls come and they dive deep into issues that they would not necessarily have in everyday conversations. I refer to it as a space where we as women and girls come on and we put on our armor for life, because that is a fight. So what are some of the lessons that we've learned? The main one is that women are actually willing to volunteer time, no matter how busy they are, if they perceive the experience to add value to their everyday lives. We know that girls are more open, they're able to talk and share experiences if they have a caring adult in their lives, and we've seen this happen. We also have learned that women often lack the tools and the language to start a conversation with girls, and if you can teach them or give them the tools to be able to start a conversation, the work is half done. We also know that there's a greater awareness about vulnerability and what it means to support girls in caring ways in communities where often girls are pathologized for being rebels or treated as outsiders. And we know that victim blaming never gets us anywhere. So fast forward to 2014. What am I doing in 2014? So, as a woman who really cares and who really knows that there are very particular challenges to being a young girl, but also a woman in a country like South Africa, I really believe that all it takes is one caring adult to start a conversation with a young girl to get points of influence where we can change young people's lives. Young girls, particularly 12-year-old girls, want people who see them for who they are, who hear for their voices for the way that their voices are shared, rather than what we want to hear. I want to turn a well-known idiom on its head. We've all heard it. Children should be seen and not heard. Well, I believe that children should be seen and heard. As adults, we need to know that children have lessons to teach, but that we as adults need to learn to listen. By harnessing intergenerational ideas, stories, and relationships, we can really change how we develop our country. Our socioeconomic development is really contingent on us building relationships and partnerships. If we can teach this to children, we can significantly change the direction of this country. Having a caring adult for me in my life taught me some very fundamental things. The first being that I had a voice and that I could use it, and that voice was really worth hearing. All my mentor did was be an adult woman who really held up a mirror and really showed up for me as a young girl when I needed somebody to care. And I used the notion of showing up, which is popularized by US academics and activists, which really refers to the act of being physically, emotionally, spiritually, and maybe ideologically present for a young person in crisis or for any person in crisis. The women in my life were not able to do that. And that was my experience. So, At the moment, there is not a mentoring program everywhere in the world yet. But I believe that every single woman here and out of here has the potential to form a mentor relationship with a young child, a girl child in their homes, in their families, and in their communities. And as we leave here today, I want us all to reflect on how we are showing up for girls. How are you showing up for girls? And how are we showing up for girls? Thank you.